Since I recorded my import XML function video, I had a lot of requests from people to do more detailed tutorial about import XML function. There are a couple of things I want to clarify about this. So a lot of people think about import XML function as an alternative for them to use as a web crawler and crawl information from a page. It may work in very simple cases and it's very useful, but if you really want to create a real powerful web crawler, let me tell you that import XML function is not the best way to go. So you probably want to learn some sort of programming language if you want to go more in depth into crawling web pages. Maybe start with Python or Node.js is a great option as well. C#, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you want something simpler, I guess start with Python and go from there. But as far as import XML, so there's really not much to tell about the function itself. Import XML is very simple function. Now, the part that's more difficult about it is learning about the XPath query, which is the query you use to actually find the element on a page you're looking for. To learn about XPath, I'm going to show you some things, but again, XPath is, there's a lot involved in this, right? So, and I'm going to show you some common things that you probably need. And if you really need more in detail understanding of XPath, you really need to start looking into documentation. So here I'm looking at Microsoft's documentation of XPath reference. And that's what I'm going to be using today to explain you how I'm actually deciding to use the path that I'm deciding to use, right? So in this particular example, what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to use the channel, the YouTube channel, and I will try to extract all the titles for the videos and how many views each video had, how many days ago it was uploaded, as well as the image for each video, something like that. So we could also do the link for each video and so on, right? But I'm sure at some point you're going to get the idea of where this is going. But that's what I'm going to try to accomplish. So therefore the URL where I'm going to be crawling the information is going to be the channel URL. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And then I'm going to go to my Google Sheets and type my function, which is import XML, as you may already know. And I do the quote because this is a string. Put the URL for the channel because that's where I'm getting the information from. And finally, the second one is our XPath query in quotes as a string. So I'm going to close this. So in between this not parents, but in this between these quotes, we have to provide that XPath query to actually harvest the information we need out of the page. Now to find out what information we need, we'll have to do, well, first of all, you have to know some HTML, right? So you may look into HTML if you want to really understand what I'm going to be doing here. But first of all, I'm going to go under documentation for Microsoft XPath reference. And I'm going to go under syntax to hopefully show you where we're going with this. So you can see how this is the documentation. So if you're new to Microsoft documentation, this may be a little intimidating if you look at this at first because they're not the most probably user-friendly documentation writers in Microsoft. But it's once you kind of get a hang of it, it's not really that bad. So I'm going to go here under, so I went under XPath syntax, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to navigate under probably this operators is where I'm going to find most of the information for the beginning I need. So there it is, operators and special characters, right? So you can see that our operators, the main two operators we need to know here, first of all, is this slash. right? So you can see that the slash that represents a child element, and 2 slashes is what we call a recursive descent. And I'll try to explain you what that means in just a little bit. Now, what that means in this particular case, so let's try to do this. I'm going to right click and inspect this video to see what that looks like, and I'm going to find the box in my HTML that holds the entire video. So I'm going to scroll up. See this, now if I look in the background, it selects all the videos. I want one that selects an individual video. This li seems to select an individual video on that page, and this each li, as you can see, is a video listing on that particular page, so on, right? So first of all, I'm going to try to find what I need. I need to find this li, right? And inside of this ul, and inside of that ul, inside of the li, first of all, let's try to find the title of this. So it's ul li, and then there is some sort of div element, right? And there's another div and another div, and then we have a span box, and then there's a link of some sort. There's an image down here, and video time. We have a button. Where's the actual text? Let's see where the text is for this thing. There's video time, overflow, content. So there it is. It's inside of this content div box. So I'm gonna close this one to kind of get to a little easier to understand way. So there it is. So that the title here is inside of this h3 box, and inside of that h3 you see there's this hyperlink, which is that title we're clicking on. So if I open that hyperlink, you see that the hyperlink text is the title of that particular video. So to get to this, if I was trying to get to it from an arbitrary place, let's say I want to start from this particular UL, right? And then inside of that UL, I'm gonna list this LI. So I'm gonna start with UL and LI, and as you remember, this means a child, right? So that means this list element needs to be a child of UL element. And by the way, when you do a single slash, that means a direct child. So what a direct child means is that this ULI needs to be right within this UL directly. So to give you an example of that, see, right under this LI we have this div, and then we have this other div, and then with this other div, and then we have this other div, and then inside of that other div we have this h3. So now if I'm trying to say that I want to grab the h3 inside of this li, because this h3 is not a direct child of the list element, if I simply just do slash and h3, it should not work. So if I do slash h3, which would represent a direct child, and do another slash after that, right, after h3, see there is an a element, which is what we're trying to get. We're trying to get the text within that a element. So I'm going to select that a element. So this should now work. If I hit enter, see, I'm getting imported content is empty. The reason that it's empty is because this h3 is not a direct child of our list element, because h3 is within a div, and div is within a div, and div within a div. So if I wanted to do with simple slashes, I would have to do ul, li, div, 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 and h3 and a. Now I don't want to do all of that, so I want to say that inside of li, on some level within it, there should be an h3 element. So this is where I do this 2 slashes. That means on some level within it, it's gonna be an H3, and directly inside of that H3 should be a hyperlink, which is our A element, which we can see it is right there. So at this point, when I change my XPath query to this, I'm gonna hit enter, and now you can see we're actually getting all the titles of our videos, and apparently there are 30 videos right now on the channel, and we can see all the titles for each one of those single videos. So hopefully what you learn here is what the slash means. The slash means a child, 2 slashes means it's a child, not a direct child. A single slash means it's a direct child. So that's what we have for a start with our XPath query. Okay, so far so good. We're able to get all the titles. Now the next thing I want to see is how many views each one of this video had on a separate column, right? So let's try to see where this 35 views is. I'm gonna go here. So there's this 35 views. It's within this list element, which is within this unordered list element, and which is again inside of something else, and so on, right? But what I want to get into right now is a lot of times when you're trying to extract an element from the web, you may need to use classes to find the element that you're looking for. So in this particular case, if you look at this unordered list, which has this meta information for views and how many days ago it was uploaded, you can see that the class for that unordered list item is this, which is YT hyphen, well, you can see it. I'm not able to even read that thing. But that's going to be the class. So what I'm going to show you is how to find something by the class of the element. So to make my life easy, I'm going to simply try to copy this existing import XML, escape, and we're going to put it right next to it. That's going to be our views. Now we have to modify this thing right here to find the views. So now what I'll have to do is find, let's see what I'm trying to find. So I'm trying to find an unordered list element, which is the UL element, which has a class of this, right? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to say, so there should be a UL, and that UL needs to have an attribute, and the sign of the attribute is the @ sign. So if I go back to the documentation, see, that's the sign of the attribute, the @ sign, attribute, prefix for an attribute name. Perfect. So that means that if we put it, that means we're looking for an attribute, and in this case, the class, again, if you know HTML, you know that the class here is an attribute of our unordered list element. So the class, to target that, I'm going to use the attribute sign, and I'm going to say the attribute we're trying to find is class, and that should be equal to, and I have to put what it should be equal to in single quotes. I can't do double quotes because if I did that, that would interfere with my double quotes for this function string. So right here, I'm going to say what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for this class. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and put it within those single quotes. So I'm going to look for an element unordered list, which has a class that equals to this. And then inside of that element, see, we have a list item which has that 35 views, and then we have another list item which has the 3 days ago. So right now I'm gonna go li, which is one level below, for that 35 views. So again, going back to this, the list item is a direct child, so that means I'm gonna do 1/ and li. I'm gonna hit enter, and we can see how we get 35 views and 3 days ago, 34 views 5 days ago, and so on. So that kind of may look not okay, I guess, once you're looking at it. But what happens is, because we have two list elements here, which are direct childs of this class element that we were able to find on the page, it extracts this, and also it extracts this as well, and it puts it right below on the next row right here. So what I need to extract right now is just the views, and the views is the first list element within that unordered list with this class. So instead of getting all the list elements, I just want the first list element. So to say that I just want the first one, not all of them, I can simply open my square bracket and say 1. That means get me the first one only. So I'm going to hit enter, and you can see how we were able to get all the views. So if I scroll down, you see there it is. There are all different views for each one. Now I also need how many days ago it was uploaded, and I want that to go in a separate column, 3 days ago, that one. So I'm gonna simply copy this, because a lot of this is gonna be the same. I'm gonna paste that, and the only thing I really have to change here is, because here I was getting the first list element that was direct child of this. Now I need the one right next to it, which is the second one, which is 3 days ago. So instead of just saying li1, I'm simply going to say li2. I hit enter, and again control arrow key down to make sure that works. Seems to work fine. We get exactly the same number of things we have for our videos. And usually when I do this, I usually scroll the way down, and if the number of records doesn't match, that's a good indication that I'm not doing something right. So I should go and check what's happening. But right now I see 35 views 3 days, 34 views 3 days. There it is. So 35 views, 34, and so on. That's what we have. And by the way, these views may start changing as the time goes by, because you know, I'm not refreshing the page. But so far so good. So we get views, we got how many days ago, we got the title of the video. Now the next thing we may possibly want to do, again, these are going to be the most common things you may want to look for. Like, so far you've learned how to find an element right here, and how to find a direct child or just a child. And also now, which is a very common something, you may want to look for a class. So that would be a way to look for a particular class on the page. Great. So the next one is going to be, what are we gonna get? We're gonna want to have, I'm gonna try to find the link, the image link for this video, right? Because each video has a thumbnail. I want to get the link to the thumbnail. So let's see. So each one of these videos, so we found each one of these videos, if you remember, below by saying ULLI, and then within that we found an H3. That's what we did, and it kind of works. So we didn't even have to do a class, which is kind of nice. I don't like to complicate things if I don't have to. So that's our list element. See, it selects that. Now inside of that list element we have a div, and we have this div, and then we have this div, and then we have this, right? And then we have this link, and there it is. That seems to be the image. If I keep scrolling down, that's gonna be the image, and this image, the actual link to the image file is the source attribute. So if I just go inside of the source attribute, say the source attribute link, and I simply just go here and paste, should be able to see that that opens that link. Now this link also has some parameters attached after this question mark, which shouldn't really matter, which we should be able just to open the JPEG There it is. So we're able to find the actual image file by doing this. Fair enough. So now how are we gonna get that image itself, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that there should be an unordered list and a list item, and inside of that list item, on some level in it, there is gonna be, well, I could just say an image in this particular case because there seems to be no other images, but I guess I'm gonna have to try to make this a little more complicated so I can show you a couple of other things that you may need. And that's gonna be, what do I want here? Let's try to find something interesting. ULLI. Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do because I want to show you something else here. So I could simply just say ULLI an image and then get the attribute, but that's gonna be I guess too easy. Or I guess let's start with that, and then I'll show you the more complicated way of doing things, so I can show you how to actually get a partial class, because sometimes you're gonna have multiple classes attached to it. So, like in this case, I have this list item, and one class is channels content item, and then there is the YT shelf grid item, 2 classes, and you may want to be just looking for one of those classes, and if you do equals, it's not gonna find just one of them, it's gonna look for both of them together, which is not gonna work. So we'll try to find a single class within multiple class element. So for now, I'm just gonna go with ULLI, unordered list, which is what we done. And inside of there, since there are no other images, I don't really have to sweat too much. So I'm gonna go the image. That's what I'm gonna find. And I don't want to find the text in this image, right? So first of all, let me go to that level. So I'm gonna copy this, paste this, copy the formula, escape, come back here, paste. Now ULLI, so far I said inside of that li there should be an image on some level. It's not a direct child, so we'll use 2 slashes. So we have the image element within that, right? So inside of this image, we don't want to get an image with a certain attribute. So for example, before we got an unordered with list that had a class of this. We didn't want to find the actual class, we wanted to find an element with that class. So now what we want to do is to find the actual attribute, not an element with a certain attribute value, but the actual attribute of the element. What I want to find is inside of this image, we know there is a source attribute, and we want to get the actual value for that attribute, which is going to be that URL for the image. So for that, I'm going to do another slash. So I'm going to say inside of this image, and pay attention, because before when I was saying that image has an attribute, I was directly putting this right under the image. Now what I'm saying inside of this image, there is an attribute, which is my slash again. And the attribute sign that I'm looking for, so the attribute is src, that was the name of the attribute, but I can't type src because that means an element. So the attribute sign is the @ sign. So src, we are looking for the element attribute, element image, and inside of that image there is an attribute called source, and we want to get the value of it. So src. So there it is. I'm gonna hit enter. Let's see what we get. So as you can see, we get some images, but we're getting too many of them. So apparently we're also able to get some extra things in there that should not be a part of it. It seems like the videos really start from here, from this blue one on the 13th row. So we should probably have like 13 extra records down here, which seems like that's exactly what we have. But it turns out that there are some images inside of ULs inside of LIs in other places. So this is where we have to be more specific. So I guess that brings me to my next thing, that we're going to actually get it by a class. So what I'm going to say not only it's going to be a UL and LI, but I'm going to say that UL, that LI that I'm targeting needs to have a particular class. And that class is going to be, from the name of it, it seems like channels content item. That's going to be a class for each video. So that's exactly what I'm going to use. I'm going to say that this text needs to be inside of the class. Now you can see that the class, I could probably get this whole thing and see equals to that. But I'm thinking that maybe they are not using for each video this second shelf grid item. Although they might be, but since I want to show you an example of a partial class, this is what I'm going to grab. So class. So we need the list element that we're grabbing to have this particular class. So I'm going to go back and go here. Now what I have to do is say that it's not so before, what I was doing, I was saying add class equals to the value in quotes, whatever that class was. But right now it does not equal to that. We have to find something that contains that piece of class that we need. And again, I'm going to go back to documentation here to make sure that I show you how you actually find this thing. And I'm going to go under XPath functions to show what functions I have available. So I'm going to go under XPath functions. So here, since we're dealing with text, I'm going to use string functions. I'm going to go inside of that to see what functions we have. So here, some functions that we have. So we can see we have start with function, we have substring after, and all the stuff. One of those is contains. So I'm going to click on that contains one to see how the function actually works. So see that function, it says it's a boolean, string 1 and string 2. So it basically contains, that's the function. We open the parentheses and there's string 1, string 2. And it says that string 1 is a string that might contain the second argument. So the first one is basically where we're looking for it, and the second one, string that might contain the second one is the actual things that we're looking for, and this is the text inside of which we're looking for. So the contains function in this the XPath works this way. So the first one is where we were looking for that string, and the second one is the actual string we are actually looking for. And probably there's an example somewhere down here. Well, apparently, as I said, not the best documentation probably, but there it is. At least we have this. So I'm gonna go back, and inside of this square bracket, I'm gonna say contains, and as this is a function, we're gonna use our function opening and closing. The first one was where are we looking for that string that should be contained, and I'm looking for that inside of the class attribute. So I'm going to do attribute class. That's where I'm looking, and after the comma I'm gonna have to show what am I trying to find inside of it. So that's gonna be a string, so therefore single quotes, and that's what I'm trying to find within this attribute and see if it contains it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this and hit enter, and you can see that now we're not getting those extra items because I was more specific. I found the class that contains that, right? And then I returned all the links to those images, and we got exactly 30. So that's the way you can. So now we not by watching this video, you should not only know how to target something with a specific class that equals to something, you also should know how to target something that contains a particular class in it. So that's our contains function. And again, as you can see, if I was trying to find something that begins with something, I would do start with function, right? And I would go here and see what does the function, how does it work? Returns true if the first argument string starts with the second argument string. So again, the same kind of thing. So it's going to be instead of contains, it's going to be starts hyphen with, and then the first one is going to be where it could be. So if it was inside of a class, you would do the attribute sign class. If it wasn't something else, you would do add to whatever that attribute is, and then whatever you're looking inside of that string. So that's our string right here. So that should give you a preview about how you should use this documentation and find something. So some functions you can use here. So getting back to here, there is a little extra cleanup I want to do here. So if you remember, I said that, well, this gets me the link that was in here. So that's the link right here for the image. But I don't want to get this parameters after with the question mark and after, because all the URLs may have parameters which you pass after the question mark after the URL. I don't want that. I just want the straight link to the image. So I'm going to do a little cleanup here, and I'm going to start by using equals split function. So I'm going to split this image link text, and I'm going to split it using that question mark because, as I said, parameters are after the question mark. So if I hit enter, you see how it separates this and whatever's after the question mark, it puts it in a right cell. Now I don't really want to keep this stuff on a right, so I'm going to simply put this inside of our index function, and after comma just return the first one in my array, which should be the actual link. So I'm going to double click to send this down. That should get us the actual image. So if I want the actual image to show up in my spreadsheet, I could use a function called image, and you can see that the function called image, the first argument is the URL for the image. So I could use this. I could just put that whole thing inside of the image function too. I guess that could be a better idea, but to show you what's going to happen, I'm just going to close that. The rest of the arguments are optional. So you can see how we put the actual image right in our spreadsheet by doing this. Now I'm probably going to go back here and modify this and make sure I just put my image function right around this so I don't have to use another cell. It's weird how this doesn't actually send down when there are actually elements below. It's kind of stupid, but anyways, there it is. We have all our images for each one of our videos now nicely extracted to our spreadsheet. So again, if you were working with e-commerce, you could same way get the prices for product, the titles, the image for the product, as you can see, and so on. So I guess the last thing I may want here is just a link to the actual video itself. So the link to the video itself is this hyperlink right here. So that's gonna be so again, that's the same ULLI side of the channel, but I don't need the image, I need the hyperlink pretty much. So, and inside of the hyperlink we'll find the link. Okay, that's not gonna be a big deal. So we should be able to use most of what we did here without having to recreate this whole thing. So I'm going to simply just highlight this whole thing, copy, hit escape, come back here, paste the function. So the beginning should be fine. This is unordered list and the list item that contains the class this. So that we can use all of that without changing a thing because that's still the same so far. So inside of that list element, we want to have a hyperlink element. Instead, we said we want an image before. Now I want a hyperlink, which is our A element. So I'm going to say instead of img, it's going to be A. And inside of that hyperlink, we should have an attribute, and the link is href, hyperlink reference attribute. There it is. That's what I want to get, the value for this href attribute. So again, that should not really be much of any different than our image. Instead of src attribute, which is the source for the image, we're going to get href attribute, which is the hyperlink value. So hit enter. That gets us a link to the video. Now this is not a full link. As we can see, this seems to be a relative link, and there seems to be some extra stuff here, so I'm gonna have to figure out why do we get 60 instead of, it seems like we get the same link twice. So I'm gonna have to figure out why exactly I'm getting the same hyperlink twice instead of getting it once. So I got here, that's our hyperlink right here. Okay, fair enough. So that's our A element. Now let's see, is there anywhere else that it mentions the hyperlink? It forces it to do it twice. That's our A right here. So let's see if there's another hyperlink somewhere below here. It says a button, so doesn't seem like it's there. Probably this one. Yep, that's gotta be this one. So see, there's a hyperlink. No, it's probably not because it's not inside of it. So it's not gonna be it, or it could be because we UL li, that's the channel, and we're looking inside of that. So on the same level. Yeah, so this hyperlink falls inside of that too, so that's not good. So what that means is that we have to be a little more specific. We said ul li. Now instead of just directly jumping to this image right after that, we could say, well, it should be in this div that has this class of YT lockup thumbnail, right? So let's pick that as a middle step. So I'm going to copy that class to make sure I have it, and that's a div element with this particular class. So after the li, we're going to do another step, which is going to be the div, and then we're going to go to the link. Great. So I'm going to go back here, ul li. After the li, it's not a direct child, but it's a child nonetheless, so it's a div element, and it should have an attribute class which need to be equal to, again in single quotes, that. So I'm gonna hit enter, and then I'm gonna try to expand this so you can see what I did here. So there it is. So I did see, you unordered list item that contains this class, and then that should inside of it have a child div element which should have a class attribute that equals to this, which is this YT whatever thumbnail, and then inside of that at some level there should be a child hyperlink, and we want to get the href attribute of that hyperlink. So let's see. There it is. We only have 30. Now that's the correct number of links. Now the only problem, I guess, if we could call this a problem, is that Apparently these are not full hyperlinks, they're relative links. So if I opened one of these videos,
how's it going? So
I've downloaded. Let's stop that. So you can see how instead of getting the full one that says https youtube.com and so on, I'm just getting the /watch, the question mark, and all that stuff after that. So to make this a full hyperlink, we'll simply have to do a little joining here. So I guess I'll just use concatenate function in this case. So I'm going to use concatenate, and the first piece of my concatenate is going to be that first part that was missing, which is a domain name, and comma, and I want to concatenate the rest of this hyperlink after that. Close my parentheses. That should now give us the full link. Let's just control arrow key down. Now if I click on one of these, so let's say this one should be this VLOOKUP with array formula function. So I'm going to click on it, click on this. That should open our video.
Okay, so
and it does, no problem. So you can see how we were able to extract the link to the video, the image for the video, the link for the image for the video, the view count, how many days ago it was uploaded, the title of the video, and every single thing we needed from this particular page. So if we were trying to be very specific about it, if I assume like this minutes or seconds or whatever those things are, see there's like how long the video is. You could also extract this, obviously using the same method. So if I go under the thumbnail, right under the thumbnail there should be a span which has another span which has another span, or we could go with a class. And again, I usually tend to try not to complicate things that can be easy to do. So for example, we could, for example, just use the video time class with the span element, and if there are no other span elements on this page with video times, that should probably just take care of the whole thing without having to go this within that, within that, within that, within that. So let's try to do that. I'm just going to try to get everything, every span element that has a class video time, which has a span element right inside of it, right? So that should be something we could do. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Let's try to extract video times as well, since we went this far. So I'm going to just paste it here for a second. And I'll just copy this whole link. Escape. Get back here. Paste. So we want... So as I said, I want to try to not to complicate this. So I'm going to look for all the span elements that have a class. And again, it's an attribute class. So at class equals what was it? Video time, I guess. And see, I keep doing this, but you have to use single quotes because it's gonna break your quotes here. Video time, and close this. So that's gonna target that span elements with video time, and then inside of that there should be another span, if you remember. So we had like span class video time. Inside of it we have another span. The reason I didn't use this directly because it doesn't have any particular identifier on it, so therefore I had to use this one. So that should hopefully work. Let's see, unless there are other elements in there. And want video time, so I got that right. So there it is. Now that gets me the video time for each one of those videos. So again, if you know HTML, this should definitely make a lot of sense to you, and it shouldn't be difficult from this point on to understand. So again, to get the documentation and understand the references, if you need something in particular, make sure you go to XPath reference, and so there are other places where you can find XPath documentation. From what I've seen, this is the one that was the fullest reference out of everything else I was able to find so far. If you have a better documentation, please let us know where it is. But here you're gonna find everything under either XPath syntax or functions. So most of the functions you're going to need, that you're gonna have to just find something on a page, it's probably gonna be your string functions. That's where you want to concentrate, because there are things like number functions and things like that in XPath where you can actually do some numerical operations and stuff like that. But if you're just harvesting a page, you may need it in some cases, but I guess you're not going to need it. If you get to that level, I hope you'll figure that out. We also have this node set functions, as you can see. Again, it could be interesting to find out, especially like this last function, for example. So the last function, an example of where you could, I guess, use it. If you remember, like here, I believe we should be able to use that. When I said, let's get the second list item, right? So what if I just set the last function instead? It gets me the same thing. So the difference between like using number 2 and using this last function, which is another interesting function, is that when I was looking at those list elements, this was the first one, this was the second one, right? Now, if you had like multiple list elements in each one of these videos, and there was no consistent way of knowing how many you're gonna have, but the first one was 35 views and the last one out of the list item was like 3 days ago, and there was something in the middle, but sometimes it was in the middle, sometimes it wasn't, you could use the last one to just grab the last one, which is what I did, just switching to the last function, which is an interesting function. Again, could be handy sometimes. So again, just look at this documentation if you need more details, right? And if you really want like a full XPath tutorial, maybe if there are enough requests, I'll do one that's gonna cover a lot more detail about all these different syntaxes and operators you can use here. But what I've just covered in this video should give you most of what you need to do most of the extraction out of a web page. So again, as I said in the beginning of the video, I don't recommend actually relying on XPath to extract things out of the web page, because the more forward we go, especially with new frameworks like React, Vue, and you know, where the actual JavaScript is handling the content on a page, this is not going to be able to handle it, because when this import XML goes to the page needs to be loaded in the HTML. If it then reactively loads it on a page, it's not going to be able to get those. Anyways, let me know if you like this video, and you know, if you have any suggestions, just leave a comment, and thanks for watching.